There is one sentence that can end an argument a narcissist thought they had already won. Not a threat, not an insult, not even something said with anger. Just a handful of calm, quiet words that do more damage to their sense of control than years of conflict ever could. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that sentence is, why it works, and why narcissists spend the rest of the relationship, and sometimes the rest of their lives, trying to avoid ever hearing it again. If you've ever said something to a narcissist that made them go completely silent, comment, "They went quiet," so I know you felt this too. To understand why one sentence can carry this much weight, you first have to understand what a narcissist is actually protecting underneath all the confidence, charm, and control. It isn't their reputation. It isn't even the relationship itself. What they're protecting is a fragile internal structure that depends entirely on other people never fully seeing them clearly. The moment someone sees through that structure and says so out loud, calmly, without anger, without begging for them to change, something breaks that cannot easily be repaired. Stage 1. The illusion. They depend. On every narcissist operates behind a carefully maintained illusion. The illusion that they are always right. The illusion that they are always in control. The illusion that the people around them are too dependent, too intimidated, or too invested to ever truly challenge them. This illusion isn't built once and left alone. It requires constant maintenance, constant reinforcement, constant management of how others perceive them. This is why narcissists are often so skilled at deflection, blame shifting, and rewriting history in real time. Every uncomfortable truth gets redirected. Every mistake gets minimized or denied. Every accusation gets turned back around on the person raising it. Over time, the people closest to them learn to tiptoe around certain topics entirely, not because those topics don't matter, but because raising them has never led anywhere productive before. This creates a strange kind of safety for the narcissist. As long as no one says the quiet part out loud, the illusion holds. As long as everyone plays along with the version of reality they've constructed, they never have to face what's underneath it. This is precisely why one sentence, spoken plainly and without hesitation, can do what months of arguments never could. It breaks the unspoken agreement to stay silent about what everyone already sees. Stage 2. What the sentence actually does. The specific words matter less than what they represent. A sentence like this doesn't need to be cruel, and it doesn't need to be long. What makes it powerful is that it names something true, clearly and without apology, in a moment where the narcissist expects the usual deflection, the usual over-explaining, the usual willingness to back down rather than hold ground. When someone finally says calmly, "I see exactly what you're doing," or "This isn't about me anymore, this is about you," or simply, "I'm not going to argue about something that isn't true," they are doing something the narcissist has spent years preventing. They are refusing to participate in the distortion. They are naming the pattern instead of getting lost inside it. This matters because narcissists rely heavily on confusion as a control mechanism. As long as the other person is busy defending themselves, explaining their intentions, or trying to prove they aren't the problem, the narcissist remains in control of the conversation's direction. A sentence that steps outside of that entirely, that refuses to defend, explain, or engage on their terms, removes the mechanism they've depended on. There's nothing left to twist, because nothing was offered up to be twisted in the first place. Stage 3. The silence that follows. Almost universally, people who have said something like this to a narcissist describe the same immediate reaction. Silence. Not calm silence, not thoughtful silence. A stunned, unsettled silence that doesn't match the confident, unbothered persona the narcissist usually presents. This silence happens because for a brief moment, their usual scripts don't apply. They didn't get the reaction they were expecting. They didn't get an argument to redirect. They didn't get tears to comfort their way through, or anger to punish their way past. What they got instead was clarity, delivered without emotional fuel for them to feed on. And because their entire relational strategy depends on having something to work with, whether that's your fear, your guilt, your anger, or your need for their approval, a sentence that offers none of that leaves them with nothing familiar to grab onto. This is often mistaken by the person who said it as the narcissist simply not caring or not being affected. In reality, the opposite is usually true. The silence is often the sound of someone scrambling internally to figure out how to regain control of a situation that has, for the first time in a long time, slipped entirely out of their hands. Stage 4. The scramble to regain the upper hand. Once the initial silence passes, narcissists typically respond in one of a few predictable ways. Some will attempt to minimize what was said, acting as though it was an overreaction or claiming they don't even understand what the other person is talking about. Others will pivot immediately into counter-accusation, trying to shift the conversation onto something the other person has done wrong, hoping to regain the emotional high ground through sheer redirection. A smaller number will attempt a more subtle approach, appearing wounded, appearing hurt, appearing as though the sentence was cruel or unfair, hoping to trigger guilt in the person who said it. This tactic often works on people who aren't used to holding their ground, because it reintroduces the very dynamic the sentence was meant to interrupt. But when the person holds steady, when they don't rush to apologize or soften what was said, this tactic tends to fail as quickly as the others. What's happening underneath all of these responses is the same thing: panic, disguised as composure. The narcissist is not simply reacting to the words themselves. They're reacting to the realization that the person in front of them is no longer operating from the same emotional playbook they've relied on for years. Stage 5. Why it lingers. Long after the conversation ends. Most confrontations with a narcissist fade from memory relatively quickly, at least on their end, because most confrontations don't actually threaten the illusion they're protecting. But a sentence like this one tends to linger, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for years, because it represents something they can't easily explain away. It represents a moment where someone saw them clearly and said so without flinching. This lingering effect often shows up in unexpected ways. They may bring up the conversation again later, seemingly out of nowhere, trying to reframe what was said or convince themselves it didn't mean what it clearly meant. They may become more cautious around that specific person, avoiding certain topics or approaches that previously worked without issue. In some cases, they may even become slightly more careful with their behavior around that person specifically, not out of genuine change, but out of a subtle awareness that this particular audience is no longer easy to manipulate. This is the quiet, long-term power of a single well-placed sentence. It doesn't need to be repeated constantly to have lasting impact. Once it's said clearly, and once it's followed by consistent behavior that backs it up, it becomes a permanent shift in how the narcissist approaches that relationship going forward. Stage 6. Why most people never say it. If a sentence like this is so effective, a natural question follows. Why don't more people say it? The answer usually comes down to fear, though that fear takes different forms for different people. Some fear the immediate reaction, the anger, the denial, the possibility of an escalated argument. Others fear the relationship ending entirely, especially if the narcissist in question is a parent, a long-term partner, or someone deeply embedded in their daily life. There's also a quieter fear that often goes unspoken, the fear of being wrong. Narcissists are often skilled at making the people around them doubt their own perception of events, a pattern frequently referred to as gaslighting. After enough time in that dynamic, many people lose confidence in their own read of the situation, even when that read is accurate. Saying a sentence like this requires a level of internal certainty that gaslighting is specifically designed to erode. This is why, for most people, this sentence doesn't come easily or early. It usually comes after a long process of rebuilding trust in their own perception, often with the support of therapy, trusted friends, or simply enough distance from the relationship to see the pattern clearly for what it is. Stage 7, the aftermath of finally saying it. For the people who do eventually say something like this, the aftermath is rarely as dramatic as they feared it would be. Sometimes the narcissist reacts with anger, sometimes with denial, sometimes with a strange temporary softness that fades as quickly as it appeared. But regardless of their specific reaction, something important shifts on the other side of that sentence, something that belongs entirely to the person who said it. That shift is the recognition that they were never actually powerless in the relationship. They simply hadn't yet said out loud what they had known internally for a long time. Once that sentence is spoken, it can't be unspoken. The narcissist may try to minimize it, argue with it, or pretend it never happened, but the person who said it knows better. They know exactly what they meant, and more importantly, they know they finally meant it enough to say it clearly. Stage 8. Why narcissists fear this more than anger. It's worth pausing here to address something that often gets misunderstood. Many people assume that anger is the thing narcissists fear most from the people around them. In reality, anger is often something they can work with. Anger gives them a role to play, either as the wounded party defending themselves or as the calm, reasonable one responding to someone else's supposed instability. Anger, ironically, often reinforces their narrative rather than threatening it. What actually unsettles a narcissist is calm, clear-eyed recognition delivered without the emotional volatility they know how to manage. A sentence spoken quietly, without raised voices, without tears, without any request for them to change, is far more difficult to spin into a story where they come out looking reasonable. There's no chaos to point to, no overreaction to highlight, just a simple, steady truth that doesn't require defending because it was never framed as an accusation in the first place, only an observation. This is why, over time, calm tends to be far more disruptive to a narcissist's sense of control than confrontation ever is. Confrontation gives them something to fight. Calm gives them nothing to fight at all. Stage 9. What this sentence really represents. At its core, this sentence isn't really about the narcissist at all, even though it's aimed directly at them. It's about the person saying it finally trusting their own perception enough to speak it plainly. It's about choosing clarity over comfort, even when comfort would be easier in the moment. It's about refusing to keep participating in a version of reality that was never true to begin with. This is why the sentence tends to mark a turning point, not just in how the narcissist behaves going forward, but in how the person who said it sees themselves. It becomes proof to themselves more than anyone else that they are capable of holding their ground, trusting their own judgment, and refusing to be talked out of what they know to be true. Stage 10. How the same sentence lands differently, depending on the relationship. Not every narcissist reacts the same way, and part of what determines the response is the type of relationship involved. A romantic partner tends to respond with a mix of panic and manipulation, often escalating quickly because the loss of control feels immediate and personal. A parent, especially one who has spent decades being the unquestioned authority in the family, often responds with a much deeper defensiveness, sometimes framing the sentence as betrayal or disrespect rather than boundary setting. A boss or coworker with narcissistic traits may respond with cold professionalism, using policy or hierarchy as a shield to avoid directly engaging with what was said. What stays consistent across all of these different dynamics is the underlying discomfort. Regardless of the relationship, the sentence disrupts an established hierarchy that the narcissist has depended on to feel secure. The specific tactics they use to regain footing may differ: guilt from a parent, jealousy from a partner, formality from a boss, but the underlying motivation is the same. Re-establish control, minimize the disruption, and return things as quickly as possible to a dynamic they understand and can manage. This is worth knowing because it helps set realistic expectations. If you're preparing to say something like this to a parent, expect defensiveness rooted in decades of unquestioned authority. If it's a partner, expect an emotional escalation designed to pull you back into familiar patterns. If it's a workplace dynamic, expect a colder, more procedural pushback. None of these reactions mean the sentence failed. They simply reflect the specific tools each type of relationship has trained the narcissist to reach for first. Stage 11. The danger of expecting an apology. One of the most common mistakes people make after finally saying something like this is expecting it to produce genuine accountability. It rarely does, at least not immediately, and sometimes not ever. This can feel disappointing, even after everything discussed so far, because there's a natural hope that clarity will be met with equal clarity, that honesty will be met with honest reflection in return. In reality, most narcissists respond to a moment like this by protecting their ego first and considering the relationship second, if they consider it seriously at all. This doesn't mean the sentence didn't matter. It means its impact often isn't visible in the way people hope for. The value of saying it doesn't come from guaranteeing a changed response from them. It comes from the shift it creates in you, the confirmation that you can see clearly, speak clearly, and hold your ground without needing their agreement to validate what you already know to be true. Letting go of the expectation of an apology is often what allows people to fully feel the power of having said it in the first place. The sentence was never a bid for their transformation. It was a declaration of your own clarity, and that clarity doesn't require their approval to be real. What this means for you. You don't need a perfectly worded sentence to reclaim your footing in a relationship like this. You don't need the ideal timing, the ideal tone, or a guarantee of how the other person will react. What you need is the internal clarity to know what's true and the willingness to say it plainly, without over-explaining, without apologizing for having noticed what you noticed. The narcissist's fear was never really about the specific words you use. It's about what those words represent. A person who can no longer be confused, no longer be redirected, and no longer be talked out of their own reality. Once that clarity exists inside you, the exact sentence tends to find itself, whenever the moment calls for it, calm, brief, and impossible for them to argue their way around. If this gave you language for something you felt but couldn't quite say, let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one.